One of our awareness tools that we use to help reestablish that mind-body connection to our core canister is our jellyfish breath. Why? This is a great awareness tool. It helps to connect our breath and the practice of our breath, and therefore our mind, as we consciously move our breath, to our body. We also use the breath in this tool to feel the three pieces of the trunk core canister move: the respiratory diaphragm, the abdominal wall, and the pelvic floor. And so through this jellyfish breath practice, we will establish that connection. We will feel the different pieces move, and we'll use our mind and our breath to feel what is going on in our trunk core canister as we work together through this moving, breathing meditation. So Emily's going to show us how she's going to set up, and then I'll talk you through the actual jellyfish breath.
Great. So we're going to start with a bolster, two if you have two bolsters, and a few blankets. Your setup should be stable underneath you and high enough that you can still stack your system above the bolster. So one bolster is not enough height for me. I need to get myself a little bit higher so that my pelvis can be aligned underneath my rib cage and my head can sit gently on top. I'm going to take a second bolster to build it up a little bit higher, as well as a folded blanket. This is going to give me nice feedback into my pelvic floor so I can feel that connection of pelvic floor with my breath. So I will stack my system above the bolsters and the blankets, and Diana will guide me through the meditation.
So once you've comfortably found yourself set up in your perfectly stacked position, using bolsters, blankets, blocks, whatever you have, or pillows at home, you can close your eyes and comfortably stack your system. And once your eyes are closed, you can start to pay attention to your breath. So just have your eyes closed and start to visualize your breath moving in through your nose, down the back of your throat, in through your lungs, and evenly sharing space into both lungs on your inhale. And then on your exhale, just visualize the breath slowly moving the way it came in, slowly coming back out of your lungs, through the back of your throat, and back out of your nose. And we'll take a few breaths like that, where you're just watching the breath moving in through your nose, through your throat, splitting into both of your lungs, and then on exhale, coming back out of your lungs, through your throat, and out your nose. Maybe on your next breath, start to visualize that as the breath comes into your lungs start to expand in three different directions: front, back, and side. So every inhale, you get a three-dimensional expansion of your rib cage and lungs. On every exhale, the lungs slowly squeeze the air out, and the air comes out the throat and the nose. Inhaling the air into the nose, expanding the lungs and ribs in three different dimensions, and exhaling, collapsing. Inhaling, lungs expand in three different directions, and exhaling, contracting. The next one will layer in the diaphragm. As you inhale, the diaphragm moves down or descends into the abdominal wall, like the movement of a jellyfish. And on your exhale, the diaphragm pulls back up into your rib cage. So now as you inhale, expand the lungs 360 degrees and allow the diaphragm to move down into the abdominal wall. Exhale, the diaphragm moves up, the lungs contract. Make sure your belly and your abdominal wall is soft, that you're not gripping here, because then if you are gripping, you won't be able to allow that expansion and that movement of the diaphragm down. Inhaling, diaphragm moves down, belly expands, rib cage expands 360, and exhale out. Soft belly. Now I'll add the pelvic floor. So now as you're inhaling, both the respiratory diaphragm and the pelvic floor will begin to move down and open and widen with inhale. And on exhale, they'll both move back up. So the respiratory diaphragm moves up and the pelvic floor pulls up. Let's focus more on the pelvic floor. As you inhale, you should feel a widening and an opening across all 2 or 3 holes of your pelvic floor. And as you exhale, imagine them narrowing and closing up. Again, just focusing on the pelvic floor, inhaling everything down and wide, 3 holes opening. Exhale, narrowing and pulling up. Pull the whole thing together. Breath in, rib cage widens, diaphragm moves down, jellyfish of the pelvic floor down. All in concert, exhale, move up. That's the jellyfish breath. That's that consistent abdominal wall pressure system. Inhale, moving down and opening. Exhale, everything up. Through that nice movement, the coordinated movement of the respiratory and the pelvic floor diaphragm, we maintain consistent pressure within the abdominal wall. Let's play around with it and see what happens when we do some changes in our structure. Emily, move back into a posterior tilt. She'll rock back into a posterior pelvic tilt. When she rocks back into a posterior tilt, or when you rock back into a posterior pelvic tilt at home, you'll feel changes in how you can recruit that jellyfish breath. Can you widen across the diaphragm 360 degrees? Can you still open across the 3 holes of your pelvic floor, or does one feel more restricted? Rock forward into an anterior pelvic tilt. How does it feel here? Can you access the breath in the posterior rib cage and the posterior diaphragm? Can you open across the anterior pelvic floor, or is it restricted? Can you let your belly go? These structural changes that we embrace in our posture can really affect the fluidity of that jellyfish breath. Come on back into a neutral pelvis. Okay. And let's just feel what it feels like if we move into a rib tilt. So go ahead and lift your sternum up, Emily. If you're just in this rib tilt, can you still access that breath? Can you allow the abdominal wall to open? Then draw your sternum down. Slump, like you're sitting at your desk all day and working. What happens to our core canister here? What happens to our jellyfish breath? You're really restricted in that anterior diaphragm. Really restricted. And then back to neutral. One more variation to look at. What happens when we side bend in our rib cage? Take a side bend to the right. We collapse down on that right-hand side. The breath is so much harder to access through the right side of our diaphragm. That can influence the whole core canister on that side, the whole abdominal wall. That can change what happens through the pelvic floor. And then coming back to neutral. So when you do practice this at home and you do explore your jellyfish breath, do try to get yourself in your most optimal alignment so you can really feel the fluidity of these diaphragms and the abdominal wall moving together.